Hey, 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 I'm Alex Shay with Gun Owners of America, and this is Meet the Pressers.
Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Klint and Brought to you by Public Safety and Education and the Trigger Pressers Union.
This episode is brought to you by Sabre Red, pepper spray and safety products for all Americans. Next Level Training, makers of CERT training products. Mantis, Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Firearms Owners Against Crime Institute for Legal, Legislative, and Educational Action. Meet the Pressers is also supported by other shows, companies, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Hi, this is Meet the Pressers. I'm Matt Mallory, your host, and this is my other host, Klint and And this is a safe place to talk about guns, political activism, faith, all that good stuff, fun stuff that's taboo on all the other shows. So, Klint, why don't you go ahead and introduce our awesome guest?
Yes, tonight our special guest is Alex Shay. Alex is someone that I've had the pleasure to work with over the years. He's an educator. He's a Second Amendment advocate. But currently, he is the West Virginia director of Gun Owners of America, as well as a few other things that you do there at GOA. Yeah, like food and beverage director. You do some other things too, right? Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. It's great. It's a pleasure to be here. Always cool to hang out with Klint and Matt.
Yeah, so tell us what led you to, I know you had been a volunteer and have done work with GOA for many years, but what made you finally take on the role and the title with GOA?
Yeah, it begins a long time ago. I mean, I was one of those kids, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and then you had the towers hit while I was making waffles in home ec class. And I knew that I had a higher calling. I knew that I needed to get involved in preserving human rights. And at the time and in the mind of a 17-year-old, that means join the Army, which I absolutely loved. I was 10 years as a combat medic and served in beautiful sunny Bakuba, Iraq. And I did that for 15 months between 2007 and 2009. But it was during that deployment that I really realized the weight of what the oath of being a soldier is. And that oath is to protect the Constitution. And it was only, and this is like 6 years into being a soldier professionally, that I realized, like, I am risking my life for these ideals, and I don't truly understand what they are and what they mean to me. So I started reading the Constitution. I read it more and more. And then when I came back to the stateside, I knew that I wanted to volunteer, wanted to be in the business of building better citizens. And so I took that upon myself, and I went to it first through my own like medical training, because being a combat medic, I had first aid, CPR, AED, stop the bleed, TCCC, combat lifesaver. I wanted to take that and I wanted to make as much of an impact in my world as I could, because I had seen what that was like when people don't have that training. Mm-hmm. So that training led to me becoming a instructor at a facility called Defense in Depth in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I worked there for almost 5 years as the membership and event coordinator. And that's actually how I met Klint many years ago. And so at that time, I just started volunteering. And I was this weird, crazy kid that just kept calling the Gun Owners of America office. And I literally was like, hey, I need more brochures. Hey, I need stickers. Hey, I need patches. Hey, can we organize something? Can we do this? Can we do that? And they're like, who the heck is this person? And why does he keep calling? And so that turned into them offering me a field representative position. And I just kept volunteering, and I volunteered for years. And I've attended a few SHOT shows, and I've been to a number of NSSF expos on behalf of the organization. And then most recently, the USCCA Expo in Milwaukee. So they have me here, there, everywhere. I've been through multiple rallies throughout multiple states. This year, I was just in New York a few days ago, where I actually had the opportunity to meet up with Matt Mallory, and we gave a very impassioned speeches about the importance of not only the Second Amendment, but of activism, of standing up to tyrannical governments, getting involved, and actually building a foundation of resistance. Now, resistance doesn't mean that you're going to win, but it does mean that you're not going to go quietly into the night,
Right.
because you may lose, but if you don't fight, you've already lost.
Yep.
And that's really the big takeaway from the experiences that I had with Matt in New York. And then I get to do fun stuff. I was just in the GSSF competitive shooting match in Talladega, came in 9th place in amateur Guardian match. So
It's not bad.
Okay with me.
And
That's
how many people were in that?
There were 921 entries, so I don't know
Yikes.
how many were specifically in that.
Well,
category.
and if you're
I thought
in
you were
the
going to
top
say
10,
9.
I was gonna say-
You said
No,
there was
that's-
9, and I was like, he was going to stop at 9. I was like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
No, that's pretty impressive.
that
dude.
is awesome. That is
Yeah,
great.
that's a facility I have not been to yet. I would love to see that.
Oh, the CMP in
Yeah.
Talladega is so amazing. I highly recommend it. I was blown away. I actually ended up buying 3 M1 Garands.
Oh, 3.
I've
Not
spent
just
a,
1.
I've spent a bit of time up at Camp Perry, but I never made it down to Talladega yet. Actually taught a class down there about a year and a half ago. I thought I was going to be able to break away for the afternoon and just at least go say that I was there, but I've never done it. Yeah, so it's interesting you say, you know, one of the things that GOA is doing and is having success with is something that organizations I'm involved with have done too, is the legal cases. The court battles matter, and the court battles take a lot of time, and they take a lot of money, and they're not instant gratification, and they're expensive, and they're not sexy, but continuing to take the fight to the courts is important. So right now, GOA's got quite a bit of lawsuits around the country, but the two we want to talk about today were up in New York, and also what has recently occurred in New Mexico. Can you shed any light on those legal actions?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to talk about New York first. We have the Antioch case. That has gone back and forth. You know what I'm saying? That went through the New York court system and then got kicked up to the Second Circuit. The Second Circuit placed remanded it back down, and then there was a stay. So it is exactly what you were just saying. There is always a never-ending ability for time to be drawn. So when you see this kind of action in the courts, 9 times out of 10, they're just kicking the can down the road because they're waiting for some other kind of favorability to fall in their direction. Sometimes it's political, the winds of political power have shifted. Elections have happened. Sometimes it's the appointees of new judges, whether it be on the federal circuit level or on the Supreme Court level. And sometimes it's the court of public opinion. And that's why you tend to see the court of public opinion. You tend to see politicrators, judges, governors, and even as far up as the presidency, you'll see different people trying to take advantage of really sadly disgusting situations where they're trying to make all gun owners look as though they are the criminals or psychopaths that actually harm people, when there are, for example, in their claims, there's 30,000 firearm deaths in the United States, and 60% of that is suicide. That's not a good number, but there's over 300,000 defensive uses of guns, and that's on the lowest end of the spectrum. It's probably close to 3 million, but you'll never hear that statistic. You'll never understand why. So we're like really coming at it the wrong way, but that's where becoming educated about these things comes into play. So, and also you can't just demonize something specifically because of the actions of a few, because if you did want to make that argument, you could also make the argument that because more Americans die every year from medical malpractice, then we should ban doctors. Okay, so there's way more medical malpractice deaths than there are firearm deaths. We don't ever approach the idea of we should, completely abolish medical institutions. And that's because it's absurd, because both of those arguments are absurd. But I digress. So we also
to your point, and I've made this case in legislators' offices, and to kind of illustrate the ridiculousness of that kind of mindset that some have. If rape is a problem in the United States, isn't it? Well, the surefire way to eliminate rape would be to have every man go through a appendectomy and get their penis cut off, and that would eliminate rape, right? And people look at you like, what? Are you kidding me? And but that's kind of how the gun owner is being treated. The legal gun owner is being held to the standard of the criminal. And then these elected officials or so-called elected officials have policies that actually promote criminal behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. But education is absolutely what needs to take place at the elected official level. Obviously, if we can educate those folks that maybe just are ignorant, but we also need to educate the court of public opinion, which I think was the point you were trying to make there, if I'm correct.
Absolutely. And you're taking the words right out of my mouth. So when we talk about how people perceive this, it has to be a grassroots movement. We have to get to every man, woman, and child and let them know that firearms are inanimate objects. I have a pen right here. This pen doesn't misspell words. I misspell words, right? So no matter how good of a pen, no matter if I have 10 pens or if I only have crayons or if I have no pens, it's my internal knowledge and will to learn and to be better is what's going to prevent me from making those kinds of mistakes. And the same thing is true with firearms.
Yeah, we teach a safety rule in the curriculum that I teach mainly in the USCCA curriculum, and it's we call it the big picture rule, and it's recognize you are in control of a firearm. We'll say this when someone holsters up or they sling a carbine. Recognize that you are in control of a firearm, and if you use that firearm carelessly, negligently, or with malice, you have the potential to harm or kill yourself or somebody else. And it's kind of a statement that needs to be absorbed. But I'll say, you need to say that when you get in your car. Recognize you are in control of a Ford F-150. If you use it carelessly, negligently, or with malice, you have the potential to harm or kill yourself or someone else. Every time you cut firewood, recognize you're in control of a chainsaw, sharp kitchen knife, whatever. And a lot of times when I explain that to elected officials and tell them about that safety rule that we use on the range and then apply it to that, or like you said, that pen that's in your hand right now, people start to see perhaps, oh, wait a minute, we are demonizing the object here, or the people who are using it for righteous purpose and applying the standard of the criminal to the law-abiding citizen.
And a big thing that I like to draw to people's attention, especially when I speak to politicians, is that they are afraid of what we might do with a firearm. And that is sort of assuming that we're guilty before proven innocent, when it should be innocent until proven guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, we as humans have so much greater potential than a firearm if we really truly wanted to cause damage. And as you pointed out, people drive cars.
Yep.
And when you're driving a car at 70 miles per hour and it's a 3,000-pound vehicle, the potential kinetic energy of that impact and what you can do in terms of damage, or even if you're not going that fast, even if you're just this massive object rolling over people at 5 miles an hour, that's not even comparable to a firearm. Like if you did the math and you took how many newtons are in a 9mm bullet, and then how many newtons are in 59mm bullets, and how much potential kinetic force is that I can project at an object, that doesn't even come close to like 100th of the amount of potential kinetic energy that you wield every day, every way when you drive whatever amount of speed because of the mass of the vehicle you're moving. And then don't even get me started on electricity. But these are things that we come in contact with every day, and we're expected to wield them without batting an eye. And we give them to children. We're like, hey, kid, here's an electrical socket. Hey, kid, you're 15 years old. Here's your driver's license. And no one bats an eye. But
my 7-year-old drives a tractor.
Absolutely. 7-year-olds drive tractors. They mow lawns. They're in charge of blenders. I mean, golly, Ned, there's so many things, but that's because we have educated those people on how to utilize that technology and how to wield that technology safely. And because we trust them to make those good judgments, that's how we live in a society where we're not just burning everything with Molotov cocktails every 30 seconds.
For sure. And that used to be how it was back in the day with schools. Schools used to have gun safety and gun training and shooting competitions. And I remember back at school, or at least in society, where you'd have the shotguns in the back window of your pickup truck. And I know people that were a little older than me that would say that they go to school with their gun and put it in their locker to go hunting.
I took mine in to do carving on the stock in wood shop. And the principal came over and said, "What do you got?" And I showed him. He said, "Keep it in your locker." Like it was no big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was a different time. Where I grew up was maybe a step back in time too, just because it was in the middle of the woods. But all these things that you're saying are absolutely great examples for our listeners to use when talking to logical people about, understanding what true risk is and what responsible behavior is. But too often elected officials, and I call them the elected class, they want to disarm us for other reasons. And it's because the only thing standing between real tyranny and liberty is the fact that we have an educated and armed citizenry. And we truly are the fourth check and balance. And I would say the ultimate check and balance.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. I say this all the time. And you can ask Matt. This was a huge part of what I was talking about in New York.
Yep.
And that's that somehow we have this magical conception that there are only three checks and balances in the United States government: the legislative, the executive, the judicial. But that's not even close to true, because it is we, the people, who all hold all the power. We elect the legislature. We vote in the executive, and those two parties vote for and appoint the nominees and who ultimately gets to be on the Supreme Court. And that's how we are the check of them on the paper. But even on paper, we can just have our legislatures on the state level call for a convention of states. We can rewrite the Constitution. It needs 2/3 majority in the Congress, but it also needs 2/3 majority here on the Convention of States, which is another mechanism that we, the people, enjoy and that we, the people, can utilize. And then in a very, very dark and worst case scenario, like we have twice in our history, with once the Revolutionary War and twice with the Civil War, is that ultimately at the end of the day, we have the right to assemble, the freedom of speech, and the right to bear arms. And if we need to check the government in a way that requires physical force, we do have that. Now, I never ever advocate for violence, and I never want anything like that to ever occur in these United States again. However, it is our political will and our political capital that has to be honored by our legislatures and our elected officials. And the only way that they give a flying flip about what we're doing here is because, as Chairman Mao said, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. And that is our political capital. They listen to us because they know there is a very, very real possibility that if they don't keep us appeased, we ultimately possess the power to pull them from office or to reset everything.
Well, I mean, I did an article on PDN years ago called Protecting Yourselves from Criminals and Elected Officials. And really, a lot of the things we teach as defensive instructors are proactively deterrent. They're proactively a deterrent. So me keeping my head up, looking around, not looking like a victim, I'm less likely to be attacked because I am paying attention and I look to be someone that would give a bad guy a lot of trouble if he were to attack me. I think that people who exercise their rights, all of them, not just the Second Amendment, if our citizenry is educated and exercise all those rights and know what rights they have to exercise, I think ultimately that is a deterrent to tyranny. And I think the founding fathers were pretty damn smart when they kind of set everything up there. And absolutely, we are the fourth check and balance, and we need to act accordingly to that. But unfortunately, part of the education process for us that we fight is we've got generations of people now, a voting bloc that believe the government gives them their rights, not that the people allow the government to exist to protect our rights.
Absolutely. And that's what you get when you put something like the government in charge of education. All of a sudden you have a bunch of people who are like, well, I guess it's the government that is in charge.
Yeah. Well,
I like I like your I call them Alexisms. So politicriters.
yeah, that's a good one. That should be a t-shirt.
There was another one you said at the GOA, the presentation that we did here in New York, and I was like, I love that. That's Alexisms. I'm gonna start writing them down. I got politicriters written down. So
that sounds like a cartoon, like a Saturday morning cartoon from the 80s.
It does kind of. Yeah.
It's the politicriters. Yeah, kind of like what's it?
Critter, man. Yeah. I'm from West Virginia. Everything's a critter one way or the other. These are just politicriters.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Very nice.
So I kind of sidetracked you here. This happens on our show all the time. We get sidetracked all the time. So where are you at right now with the, or where's GOA at rather, in the legal team with the New York case right now, the lawsuit?
So when it comes to the New York case, we are absolutely still in limbo. I've spent the entirety of this day researching the Antioch case and seeing where we are. And that one is still in a waiting queue to see if the Supreme Court is going to actually answer it. Now, we should have movement on that within the next month or two. So we should see something in October, no later than November, then we're going to know something is actually happening, because we did reach out to the Supreme Court. They did say that, hey, the Second Circuit has to get their act together, and if they don't, call us back. So we did reach out for them for an emergency relief on that issue. They remanded it back to the Second Circuit and told the Second Circuit, you have one more chance to get it right, or to at least address it. And that's, we're right at the end. Like,
So
we're talking about October, November before their time is up, and then we're gonna have to see where the Supreme Court goes with it.
do me a favor, because not all of our listeners are going to know exactly what that case is about. If you can give like the 10,000-foot view on that one.
So 10,000-foot view on Antioch is that it is the case that is in response to New York's response to the Bruin decision. So NYSERPA versus Bruin is a case that we had great success in New York, and that is what made it history, text, and tradition. So now, if you're going to evaluate what somebody's civil liberties are in regards to the Second Amendment, you have to do it based off of the decisions that were being made in the late 1700s, in between 1776, 1781, 1791, when the ratification and first implementation of the Second Amendment was being utilized. So that is the mechanism, that is the magnifying glass, if you will, that you have to look at, the lens rather, that you have to look at this through. And so once that happened, and New York's laws were all found to be woefully unconstitutional, once again, this is that strategy of kicking the can. They came up with a whole myriad of new tyrannical gun laws.
Yep.
And they know on its face that it's never going to fly. It's going to get smacked down, but they don't care about what's morally, ethically, or legally correct. They only care about kicking the can, because they want to file these laws, push them through the legislature, have the governor sign them, and then they want it to be addressed in court. And every time it gets addressed in court, what does the court do? They kick it back, they remand it back, they do this hem-haw
Kicking it down
game,
the road.
because they are biding their time trying to find a more favorable environment. They want to see a second term of Biden. They want to see more Supreme Court justices appointed or expanding the court.
Yep.
They are just running down the clock with these kinds of strategies, when they know on its face that it's completely unconstitutional, completely unmoral, completely unethical. This is not in any way anything other than a game to them, but they don't want to concede that power to the people, even though the will of the people have been very, very strictly demonstrated here. They don't care. So
yeah, it's a war of attrition too, because call it the pro-gun side, if we will, we'll call it the pro-liberty side, the pro-constitution side. We don't have bankrollers like Bloomberg and Soros. So they're dealing with that level of finance as well as taxpayer dollars in the case of New York.
Yep.
And, I can say with a lot of the cases that we've dealt with firearms owners against crime here in Pennsylvania, the opposition has tried to outspend us. So every time you appeal it, it goes up another level. Every time it goes up another level, it's more money. And, in that time of kicking the can down the road, people are just hemorrhaging money left and right. Yeah, so right. I think it's important for people to get involved, know about what these cases are. And if you have interest in them, contact organizations like GOA who are taking these cases, taking them to the court, and let them know, hey, I want this $10 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 to be dedicated towards this particular case. I think that's the best way to help these things go along.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Yeah.
So I've got I got an idea on how this is going to go in New York. I wanted to get your take on this, Alex. So
right.
the 5 cases that went to the U.S. District Court, where they heard arguments back in March, if any of those cases are found in favor of the peasants, right, us here in New York, I think New York State will say, okay, good for you, and then do nothing. Not make any changes to the law, or take their time, like you alluded to, making a change. Maybe they'll, put it in conference. They'll talk about putting a bill forward. The bill will sit there and it'll keep getting regurgitated every cycle.
Who would enforce it? Like, would the marshals be sent out? Like,
well, that's my point. It's like there's no ramifications. And the example of this is the New York State taser electronic weapon bill that came about in 2019, came about because the U.S. District Court Judge Hurd ruled that they're constitutional, but New York State put a bill forward, and that bill has not been signed into law. So technically, U.S. District Court's ruled that New York State needs to fix it. New York State has not fixed it to this day, and people are still getting charged for having tasers and stun guns. I think it's going to be and that's why I say I'd rather have the court, which it's probably going to be that way based on listening to the oral arguments of in March, it's probably going to be that the courts are going to find in the favor of the state, which is good because then, I don't want the state to win, but in this level of court, I think it's imperative that they do win, because then GOA and all the other organizations will bring it up to the Supreme Court. They will appeal it. What does that logic sound like?
That's exactly what I was saying, is that they are playing these games with the civil liberties of law-abiding Americans. They are taking it and they keep pushing it up and up and up. Because like I said, I'm not as familiar with every intricate law case in New York, but I do know what Caetano is, and that's a Supreme Court hearing that said that things in common use, and the example of Caetano was stun guns.
Yeah.
So specifically, there's already been a Supreme Court case that already has precedent that
Right.
extends Second Amendment protections to specifically stun guns and tasers in Caetano. So I don't even have a, like I said, this is them just running the gambit over and over and over again, trying to run out the clock for two things. One, they're waiting for a better political outcome, whether it be through their legislature or through the courts, or they just want to run down your money. They just want to burn through every single freedom fund there is out there, because they're lawyers.
And the whole time this is going on, they're restricting the rights of everyone there. They're re-educating all those young people that guns are bad. They're taking away that gun and that gun because you have a weapons charge that's kind of trumped up, but they'll let the career violent criminals loose with no bail. That, you know, so the whole time they're chipping away at the citizenry so that they may be educated, although in many cases they're informed incorrectly, but now they're less armed when you look at the populace. Right. So maybe by the time the rubber hits the road, they feel that fourth check and balance in New York won't exist, and then they can get away with whatever they want to.
And that's ultimately the goal of every tyrannical despotism, is to just be in complete control. Because gun control is not about guns, it's about control. Mm-hmm. And Klint, you definitely alluded to one of their strategies, and this is a darker strategy that they have. And that darker strategy is they do release violent criminals, and they do have like cashless bail, and we do not have protections in our schools. So when you look and you say, what is a school zone? It's a gun-free zone. But what does that mean? It means that the teachers and the faculty members are not allowed to protect themselves. They're not allowed to carry and bear arms in that place, which is a violation of their inalienable human rights. And there are many programs like Troops to Teachers, where you have tens of thousands of teachers who have previously served in the armed forces, have had top secret clearances, flown Apaches, driven tanks, been battleship commanders, whatever it is they were in charge of that was way more powerful than a pistol. But all of a sudden we're like, well, you can't possibly be trusted with that technology, even though we vetted for you for, decades before you got into this program. But I digress. Here's a bigger question. Why do we have 87,000 new IRS agents? And why do all of them have to be armed and willing to kill? Exactly. Because they are doing something with that. So we have this money to send for IRS agents to have a training and firepower exceeding the Marine Corps, but we don't have the ability to protect our schools, and we don't have the ability to actually try and convict violent felons. There is one answer to this, and that answer is they need this chaos to ensue. They need the blood of innocence to flow, because if they don't have that, then they don't have a platform from which they can scream on high that there is the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Right. And that's how they erode our rights. They erode our rights by creating this perfect storm like we saw over the past few years. People were protesting so peacefully that cities were spontaneously bursting into flame. And that was a big problem. But that was a big problem that they put into place because they needed that chaos to ensue to advance their political agenda.
Well, and what that also does is it takes away the mindset has been to make people less self-sufficient, whether that be like growing your own food, whether that be protecting yourself, whether that be financial, whether that be like keeping your own stove of gold in your house versus keeping your credit card and stuff in the bank. Because if we are less self-sufficient, we're more dependent upon the government. And as we've seen over the last couple of years of government overreach and lockdown with COVID, the vast majority of our culture had just been okay, we're waiting. Tell us what to do. We're here. I'm waiting for
Give
my
up.
check. Tell me when to put my mask on. And I think that the anti-constitution, the anti-liberty forces that do exist within the legislature and city hall and the White House, wherever, and every level of government in our country, are more emboldened now because of the test case that happened over COVID to show how easily so many of our fellow Americans just bent down and took whatever the government gave them.
Yeah.
So if we are able to protect ourselves, well, that's no good. We're thinking for ourselves. If we're able to get information on it, well, that's no good. You got to listen to what the state tells you to learn in school. You know, you want to homeschool? No, that's no good because you're not getting our curriculum. So I think we're seeing some of the damage from the 40 years or so that's been going on, and it's an uphill battle. It definitely is. But I'm really glad that you're involved with GOA and they're taking on some of these opportunities to try to right the ship. We do need to get involved and work together in those pursuits.
Absolutely.
So
And
that being said, real quick, in this right at this point, it's a good time to say, how can people get involved and help GOA out? Because it takes money to fund these lawsuits, to be able to hire you to go around and educate, and then also have the attorneys put these lawsuits forward and keep fighting them as they go back
Right.
and forth, and that can gets kicked around. So what is the most efficient and expedient way for somebody to be able to give something, help in some way to GOA to help you guys, stretch that dollar out?
Absolutely. And I ask every American every day, every way, if they're going to do something for me, I need them to do three things. And number one is I need you to get involved. Okay. Volunteer, volunteer, get active, be the change that you want to see in the world. There's no amount of money that I can ever ask for that will ever equate to actual human effort. So
Mhm.
if you
Well
can
said.
volunteer, if you can't volunteer, I get it. You're busy, you have kids, your family, you're working hard. Roger that. Got it. If you can't be in the fight, I need you to fund the fight. I need you to put money where your mouth is. I need you to donate. You can go to gunowners.org. There's join. It's only $25 a year, and that $25 goes towards everything that we're doing. We're very transparent. You can see exactly where our lawsuits are. We're always in the news. We definitely don't have anything flashy. We're not going to call you and ask you to raffle a truck or something. Like, we just want to fight for freedom. And also, it's not reoccurring. So you can sign up for like a Patriot membership and it can be reoccurring, or you can sign up for a lifetime membership and you can do it all in one fell swoop. But most people, most of the time, just do an annual membership. It's $25. That's not a big ask. And whenever we do super awesome things, for example, when the pistol brace ban went into effect, all of our members were covered under that injunction. So being a GOA member may not have every benefit every day, but there are going to be days, and we have dark days coming up ahead, where if you want to be covered under our injunctions, definitely join the fight. Now, every time GOA does ask for injunctions, we do ask for them nationally because we're in the fight for America, but very rarely do the courts actually appoint a national injunction when it comes to firearms, and they tend to want to make it about a group here or there: Second Amendment Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, so on and so forth. So that's how you can get involved. And lastly, if you can't be in the fight and volunteer, or if you can't fund it, I just need you to study. I need you to be well learned, well spoken, and articulate in your ability to communicate effectively to your friends, family members, and politicians what the ideals of freedom are, what individual liberty is, what the Constitution says. It's because we have rested on our laurels for far too long, and we believe that it could not happen here, that we have gotten to where we are.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
we are now in crisis mode, and we are fighting for our very right to exist. And it never should have gotten here. But when it's darkest before the dawn, and here we are in this moment, we need to be on the defensive. But once we get on the offensive, once we actually have super majorities again, once we actually have the presidency and the House and the Senate, when those days come, that's when you have to fight 500 times harder, because that's the only day that we're ever going to gain ground. We cannot win a war completely on the defensive. No war in the history of wars have ever been won on the defensive. You have to take ground if you're going to make any difference, and if we're going to advance the ideals of freedom and liberty in these United States.
Harumph.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What's so we all know what happened, or maybe we don't. recently a governor had just kind of decided to take the law in her own hands in New Mexico, and basically said you can't carry anymore for a certain amount of time. Just kind of banned it all together. And it was in a particular city, right, in Albuquerque.
Correct. It was Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this was, I believe it's Governor Grisham. So Governor Grisham just woke up one day and decided that she was going to create a health crisis emergency. And in the name of a health crisis, she decided that she was going to suspend all Second Amendment rights in the city of Albuquerque. So no open carry, no concealed carry. If you have a permit, it doesn't matter. And when this press conference came out, the press, who normally is not on our side, and I definitely do not believe that they were on our side in this particular issue either, but one of the reporters was like, hey, do you think that criminals are going to abide by this in suspension of the Second Amendment? And she straight up said, without missing a beat, no, they're not. So literally, criminals have a complete ability to continue to carry firearms because they in themselves, by definition, do not follow edicts or laws. But all good people with whom they could harm were told that they would be charged with felonies if they were found to be in possession of firearms in that place at that time. And that is completely tyrannical. I mean, this is
Absolutely.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, or the lady behind the curtain.
This lady behind the curtain is absolutely pushing the envelope. I mean, she is the level of despotic behavior that we've seen in the United States. She takes the cake. And we're talking about, she's beating out New York, she's beating out California, she's beating out Maryland and New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
This action is what we like to call like a canary in a coal mine type situation. They are testing the fences. They are looking to see if they can get something like this across the board, because if they can, then they know that this strategy has feet. And Klint, to your point, they've already figured out that Americans are going to just do whatever they say in the name of health safety. Like if it's healthy, I guess we have to do it. And that's never been the case. The government very rarely has any real good ideas about what safety is for you or me, because they're not exactly on our level and different people have different needs. But there have been incredible First Amendment violations, egregious Fourth Amendment violations. We're talking about the new gun control that they were proposing was going to have people searched and seized in their home if they were thought to be in violation of these types of actions.
People that live in that jurisdiction.
People that live in that jurisdiction in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
That's crazy.
But the criminals that they let run loose will then have their Fourth and Fifth Amendment protections. And won't pay attention to it altogether.
Right.
Hey, correct me if I'm wrong. I think she even actually said that she was putting a ban on lawful carry.
Correct.
She specifically said that word, lawful.
Right. You can't ban criminal carry. If we could just listen, I apologize.
That's good. That's good.
I digress. Here's what we should do. We can change it right here. Meet the Pressers. You heard it here first, folks. If we just institute a murder ban, then no one will get killed.
I said this yesterday. We should just make all crime illegal.
We just solved it. We just cracked the code, bro. This is a big brain move. If we just ban murder, then no one will ever get murdered again. Why is this legislation not in place?
Yeah. It is pretty simple, isn't it? Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. She's testing the fence. And what the tactic is in a lot of cases like this, they'll go so extreme, and what'll end up happening, or at least what their goal is, for maybe it to be, okay, you can't open carry, or you can't carry after sunrise, whatever. The compromise that they'll look for will still be an infringement.
Right.
But because their original thing was so far the other direction, a lot of the apathetic people in the middle will be like, oh, okay, well, you can still do this then.
It's that old give them an inch, they'll take a mile mindset.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she kind of just did that too. She tested the fence. She found that there was, that this entrance was blocked because she got blocked by the court, right? The court ruled against her. So then what'd she do? She went back and revised it and said, what is it? Only playgrounds and public playgrounds and public parks or something like that. She revised it to that. So that's the what you were just alluding to, Klint, right? Okay, well, you got me there, but we're going to do this.
And there'll be a large number of the citizenry that will go, well, that seems reasonable.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, and there they win.
to your point, those are the kinds of low information voters that we have to educate.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we can't be mad at them for being what they are. They are a product of the system, and we allowed the system to grow to this point. We have to wake them up. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're still in their pods. They don't know they're in the matrix.
Hmm.
It's that simple. You know what I mean? Like, people don't really experience that because we have such a stable country. We've been living in such stable food. I mean, like, people are dying of obesity in the United States. That's like a a capitalism victory lap. You know what I mean? When your people are dying because they eat too much, that's a first world problem. That's a real first world problem.
Yeah.
But because we've become so complacent and because we've sort of eliminated a lot of the things that we have, when you look back at 1776 and you're like, well, what were people facing back then? Yeah, they were facing tyrannical governments, but they were also facing like lions, tigers, bears, wolves, roving hordes of people that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, the criminals at that time, like, they didn't have any, like, the criminals could just get away with whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had to be entrusted for your own self-defense. And that has never changed. That is a
Yeah.
natural human right. So no matter what we do, lions, tigers, bears, murderers, psychos, sociopaths, they're all naturally occurring phenomena, and they will all continue to naturally occur so long as this human condition continues to exist. There is no situation where police can just instantly teleport to where you are. And even if they could,
They're the cleanup crew.
no duty to protect you.
Yeah.
Right. They're just there to draw the chalk outline around the
Yeah.
body. They have wives, they have kids, they have goldfish and cats and dogs, and they don't have a true right, or not right, but a true responsibility to die for you.
Right.
You are the only one who have any vested interest in protecting yourself, your family, your community.
Right.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Well said.
So then with the you guys found plaintiffs, and I assume they were GOA members and that were damaged by this rule. Obviously, the whole country is ultimately, and so you guys filed suit. So where is that case at right now, to the best of your knowledge?
So when we talk about New Mexico, Albuquerque, also,
Mhm.
you don't have to be a GOA member to be in a plaintiff. I mean, it definitely makes it easier for you to get in contact with us,
Mm.
but we're representing people all the time for any violations. If we can hear about it, or if you reach out to us, then we know that that is something that is happening. But once again, not only was this a horrific violation of our Second Amendment, but this violated our First Amendment, our right
Mhm.
to assemble. It violated the Fourth Amendment because of these search and seizures that were going to be in place for, implementing these kinds of laws.
Mhm.
It was so egregious in New Mexico that the chief of police, which is appointed, said that he wasn't going to enforce it. The sheriffs, who are elected and they're constitutional officers, he was like, "There's no way we're going to enforce this."
Mm.
So we had actually like a two-tier kind of attack, the visceral reaction, and it always has to be a visceral reaction, folks. You
Yeah.
have to be out there chanting from the hilltops and calling the governor's office, calling the city, calling the legislature. You have to blow it up. You have to make sure that they know that you mean business with those phone calls, with those emails, with those letters, because that reaction is what got the chief of police, the sheriff, to be on our side, and that's non-compliance. That's non-compliance from from the law enforcement side.
Yeah.
Because when you look at things like sanctuary states where they just ignore immigration law, or you look at states like Colorado where they have legalized marijuana recreationally, medically, and commercial, and for commercial purposes, that's still a Schedule 1 federal offense. You know what I
Yep.
mean? That's still considered a high level narcotic, but they just don't enforce it. They
Yeah.
just don't do anything with that, and that's non-compliance. So non-compliance is very, very important and has a very significant value to it. But more importantly, GOA, within record time, we're talking about 72 hours after this egregious edict was put forth by Governor Grisham, they had a temporary restraining order in place. And that temporary restraining order was in place for many things. But my favorite thing that it was in place for is that on the merits, we're going to win. So a judge, and this judge isn't just any judge. This is a Democratic judge that was appointed, I believe, by Obama. So this is
Yeah, I believe
Obama
so.
who's not drinking our Kool-Aid, bro. This is
Mhm.
not a Second Amendment advocate. This is not an activist judge.
Right.
This person never agrees with us, was like, hold on, wait a minute. This is too far, too fast. You have overstepped your bounds to the point where they have placed a temporary restraining order on these actions because on the merits, they're going to win.
Yep.
So that in itself is a huge, huge amount of you messed up.
Yep.
Mhm.
Now, gets even deeper for Governor Grisham because now the House of Representatives is getting in on it. You have Stephanie Lord, a representative in New Mexico, and you have Representative John Block, and these patriots are calling for the impeachment of the governor because of these actions. So when you think in your mind, well, why would anyone need to be impeached? This is equivocal to a civil rights violation like you would see out of the 1960s.
Yep.
You know, this is when you say to people, you don't have rights because of the class of citizen that you are. And the class of citizens here are people who followed the law, people who were told that if they got their concealed carry permits, or if they, you know, obeyed in this certain way, that they would get it. Now, even those things are a step too far when you come from a no compromise organization like myself. But I digress. They did it the way that the government wanted to do it, and now they just have a list. They have like basically a list of people who they can just be like, well, look out for John because he applied for a concealed carry permit and he lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That is completely egregious. That's a complete violation of his rights. Fourth, First, Second, and 14th Amendments of the Constitution, because everyone should have equal protections under the Constitution. And it just gets insane. So they are asking, and what I'm asking for you all to do is contact those people in the state legislature of New Mexico. Let them know Stephanie Lord, let them know John Block are doing the right thing. Give them more support, because when we have tyrants like Governor Grisham who are doing things of this nature, flying in the face of our inalienable human rights, they need to know that, just like I said, when those politicators do something good, you got to give them praise. But when they do something bad, give them scorn. And in this case, we can probably get her impeached if we get enough political motivation and momentum behind it.
Well, she, in fact, is committing treason because she's not upholding the Constitution that she swore to defend, and that is damaging the people. And the people are the ones that truly have control over the government, or at least should by design. So you're absolutely right about people reaching out. Even if you are not a constituent of someone, even if you don't live in that state, it is important to reach out to those folks and let them know where you stand, because the more volume that comes at them, the more likely they're going to pay attention. But, you know, those folks that are kind of sticking their neck out politically, like, it's good to let them know that there are people across the country that support what they're doing. We were doing an episode with Iraq Vet 8888, right? And at the time, Manchin was holding off on something, and he was the only thing that was keeping this anti-gun thing to go through. And so I called up his office, and
we did that on the show. We actually,
I don't think he aired it on the show. Maybe he wasn't recording, but I said, hey, look, here's my name. Here's where I'm from. I am not a constituent of yours, but what you decide today is going to affect my life. And I would appreciate it if you uphold the Constitution, because you affect more than your constituency. And I gave my number and everything like that. And I don't know if my call was the one that made him vote the way he did, but I think it's important for us to go ahead and reach out to people.
Yeah.
Also, in our own jurisdictions, you need to let your elected officials know, even if you didn't elect them, know where you stand, because the squeaky wheel will get the grease. And too often gun owners are like, well, I'm not going to talk to that asshole. Well, no, you should.
Yeah.
You should, because we can, in some cases, educate people. Not all elected officials are tyrants. They just only listen to what people tell them, right? And if we're not telling them things, they may not know any better. So there's that. But also, if they truly are tyrants, they need to know that there's opposition, and they need to know that the people are paying attention to what they're doing, and they're less likely to be tyrants.
Sure.
It's that whole deterrence thing. So no, I think that's absolutely amazing and fantastic that you're encouraging people to reach out to those legislators out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell them, especially when it comes to the situation in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I believe it's Benjamin Franklin who said that those who would sacrifice liberty for safety will lose both and deserve neither.
Deserve neither, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's written on the state capitol in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg.
Nice.
So when you're walking up the stairs, it's right there on the side. And I'm sure so many people don't even notice it's there.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to end out this episode right there.
Yeah, fantastic episode. It's really good to see you, man. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. When I'm around you, I just feel like I have more energy. You're like you're like drinking a Jolt Cola. Remember those?
Oh yeah, Jolt Cola or Surge, man. If you hate your pancreas, drink a bottle of Surge.
Well, fantastic. Could you tell everyone how to get a hold of you personally if they wanted to get in touch with you and maybe volunteer or get more involved?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always contact me, Alex Shay at gunowners.org. That's ALEXSHAY at gunowners.org. You can email me if you want to get involved. I can get you in contact with your state directors. All 50 states have either a state director or a regional director that are over them. And it really does come down to getting that boots on the ground involvement. We really, really, really need to do that. So we're going to be doing a lot more in the way of being out there in force. I myself am going to be in St. Louis, Missouri here in the next few days. Their governor also had some crazy, not governor, I'm sorry, their mayor, the mayor of St. Louis decided to make St. Louis a gun-free zone.
Jeez.
And that did not go over well. The attorney general slapped it down, and we're there to sort of run a victory lap. So we're going to be talking to people about how to get involved. But Clint, you really, really drove the point home. Very important point. Do not be black-pilled. Okay. Do not feel that your efforts are not important. Once again, and I said it before in the beginning of the show, resistance requires that you fight. And I don't mean that you think you're going to win, because how's it go? Resistance is you can fight and not know if you're going to win. But if you don't fight, you've already lost.
Well said.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, cool. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Let us know if we could be of any service moving forward in the cause of liberty. And we'll see you next time, man.
Heck yeah. Always
Stay
a pleasure,
safe.
guys.
All right,
Stay
take
safe.
care.
There's a lot of sponsors to make this show possible, like Mantis.
Make sure you check them out and give them your business.
This episode is brought to you by Saber Red, pepper spray and safety products for all Americans. Next Level Training, makers of CERT training products. Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Firearms Owners Against Crime Institute for Legal, Legislative, and Educational Action. Meet the Pressers is also supported by other shows, companies, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Thanks for watching or listening to our show.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share. Click that little bell thingy so you know when the next episode's uploaded. Support us on Patreon. Come to one of our classes. Host us to come to you and do one of our classes at your location.
And until next time.
Adieu.
Thank you for watching Meet the Pressers.